I don't know if it's different because we're recording the meeting. There it is, mute all. It's at the bottom of participants. Okay, so I'm going to mute all. Then Tom, just unmute yourself and share screen for your presentation.
Okay, we'll try that again. I'm going to click the slideshow in a sec, but I'm going to need somebody to tell me what you see when I do this. You should just see the first slide. If you're seeing the PowerPoint background, let me know, and I'll slide things around here. So, oops. And William, you'll need to enable screen sharing, please.
That's me, and you should have it now. Participants can now share screen.
There we go. Okay, let's see. So let me, yep, screen 2. Here we go. Okay. And, oops. Come on, let's go. From the beginning.
Got it.
Yeah, we do see it, and we see the slide by itself, like a
excellent
presentation.
Excellent. Well, we're going to talk about the Alternative Broadcast Inspection Program. I do them for, well, I started with New York State, then was asked to do DC, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, North Carolina, and then I ended up doing Iowa. And I've been doing this about 9 years now, and there have been a lot of changes in the rules, obviously. So, you know, what we tend to do is it's based on the old broadcast checklists, which if you happen to have a copy, you'll know were copyrighted and published in 2007 and 2009. And I think there's just a little difference in some of the rules, especially on television, since then. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what we do when we come in. First things first, the ABIP program is set up such that, you know, it's an FCC style inspection. We're not the FCC. The Broadcasters Association is not the FCC. I'm not the FCC. The idea is we come in, we take a look, and we try to identify anything you could probably get caught on by the commission. And the difference being that if the commission comes in, you're probably going to get a fine. If we come in and find this, you have a chance to correct it and to make sure you are, you know, all set and copacetic and actually meet the rules. So if we move through from the Maryland, DC, Delaware website, very simply, they've developed in cooperation with the FCC, as have just about every state going, an FCC technical station inspection program to help the stations comply. Under the program, if you're inspected, the FCC will agree to stay away for 3 years. Now, they have been making some noise about reserving the right to go ahead at any time and check out your public file. And if they decide that's what they're going to do, well, that's what they're going to do. But the reason to do the program is it will keep them out of the door for 3 years. So you don't have to worry about them coming in to inspect the plant. What we cover, first things, you know, we take a look at the at public file requirements. That was the first section in the checklists. It covers 3526 for commercial stations and 3527 for non-commercial stations. The only real difference between those two is with non-commercial stations, you have donor lists and don't have a couple of the commercial things that you do in the commercial side. So first and foremost, what I catch a lot of stations on is 73, 35, 26, and 27, paragraph B, paragraph 2, paragraph II, says that a station must provide a link to the public inspection file hosted on the Commission's website from the homepage of its own website, if the station has a website, and provide contact information on its website for a station representative that can assist any person with disabilities with issues related to the content of the public files. And you have to include that information in your public file also. A lot of stations don't have that link. And a lot of stations don't know about that link. So you can just put the link down at the bottom. What a lot of stations do, and what I usually suggest, is you put a link in the bottom of the page, which links to another page that lists all the contact information, which should be name, email, and telephone number. And then the link to the public file or public files if your website covers numerous stations. One note in that link: recently, the commission made a change in the call letters and the public file links, and they are now all in capital letters. Before, some of them were lowercase, some of them were uppercase. If you happen to be a lowercase station, check your public file link just to make sure it works, because if it's still in lowercase on your website, it's not going to connect to anything. So that's just something to watch out for. Well, what should be in the file? Well, first you need the authorization, and that's a copy of your current FCC license. Now, the FCC pre-populates a link on your page to the license. Many times these days, I find out, especially with an older station, especially with radio, it's not so much a problem with television, that if you click that link on your public file, it comes up blank. It comes up with nothing. It won't produce the license. I typically suggest to stations that you take your license and upload it to basic additional documents. And in doing that, the license is on the website. This is kind of a catch-22. So technically it's an FCC issue. However, there's no wording in the regulations that states, unless the FCC database is having a problem, that your license doesn't need to be available. This way the license is there, and you can't get caught on a catch-22, and you can't get caught on a gotcha. Next item, applications and related materials. That's any application: license renewal, construction permit, ownership reports, STA, all should be in the public file under that section. All applications should remain until acted on. So granted, denied, or rescinded. You'd be surprised how many stations I look at that folder and I've got stuff going back 15 years that's been acted on 15 years ago. It doesn't need to be there. So once an application has been acted on, it's considered no longer an application and can be hidden from the public or removed. It prevents clutter, and it also prevents confusion. One thing to keep in mind, and I'll mention this again later on, is that your public file is now available to the unwashed masses, i.e. the public, at any time of the day or night. And in the past, when it sat in the little filing cabinet in the corner of a room someplace, somebody was there to answer questions. Well, now they look through it themselves, and chances are they're not going to contact the radio station if they have a question or if they think there's a problem. They're going to go and file a complaint with the FCC, which now results in a letter to the station, which now results in you defending yourself against something that's probably irrelevant. So I just recommend, if there's dead wood, just get rid of it. Just make it clean, make it easy to look at. Citizen agreements. Well, there's on the screen, you'll see the definition of a citizen agreement. I've only seen one station thus far with a citizen agreement. If you have it, you got to have that in there. The contour map should be a current contour map, and it's populated automatically by the FCC. So you generally don't have to worry about that. Ownership reports and related materials. Copy of the most recent complete ownership report file or reports filed with the FCC for the station, along with any statements supporting those reports that are filed. You should delete the old ownership reports. Once again, I go in and look and I see ownership reports from 15 years ago. They're completely irrelevant. You only need the old ownership, the current ownership reports. And once again, if somebody's looking at it at 2 a.m. and they've gone out and gotten blitzed, and for whatever reason think it's a great idea to look at your FCC public file, you're going to get a letter that the legal eagles now need to respond to. So, cha-ching goes the cash register. And you're probably going to be explaining something that's no longer relevant. So if you have old ownership files in your ownership reports in the file, hide them or delete them. You only need the current ones. Oh, and I think I got to this later, but also in relation to the ownership reports, there is a document required that relates to any contracts. It's contracts list that it relates to any contracts in the public file, and that is anything with a network, anything that, you know, if it's a family organization and this guy has a contract with this guy, all those need to be listed in a list on that website. I've argued with some attorneys about this, and one guy told me, well, they're all listed in the ownership report. Well, it's nice, but if you read the FCC rules, it requires a separate list. You don't have to you don't have to put the reports of all the contracts there. You can if you'd like to. That's up to the station, but most stations just put up a list. And if somebody decides they want to see, I don't know, your NBC network affiliation contract, they'll contact you, and then you have 7 days or 5 days to provide it. So that's the ownership reports. Political files, well, I mean, political files are what they are. We all know what they are. You need all the information, who did what the rates are, et cetera, et cetera. And any files that are over 2 years old, you can go ahead and eliminate, because you only need 2 years of those files. You don't need stuff going back 10 years. You don't need stuff going back 5 years. I typically tell people just keep it for the year. So, 2020, 2021, and 2022 at the end of this year, eliminate 2020. And you've got 2 years right there. That way you're not driving yourself crazy trying to figure out, okay, is this 2 years? Just do it. EEO file, you need all your EEO items. A lot of mistakes stations make is they think that they have to keep the EEO stuff forever. You don't. They're only kept for the current license term. So if your license term goes back right now to 2015, well, you need all your EEO from 2015 to present. If your license just renewed, you only need the stuff for this year. So that can be removed. And with stuff, especially like the EEO, I always suggest you just contact the station attorney just to find out, just to make sure. But when you read the rule, it does say it's only for the current license term. The public and broadcasting, that's a link populated by the FCC. You don't have to worry about it any longer. If you have any material relating to an FCC investigation or complaint, very often I see things with television in relation to the closed captioning. That needs to be in the file. And it says the material shall be retained until the applicant, permittee, or licensee is notified in writing that the material may be discarded. I've never known anybody to have ever gotten one of those letters, but if you have, the FCC will know about it and it's okay to get rid of it. Otherwise, leave that information in the file. TV issues and programs lists. These have to be filed every 3 months, and there are specific information that's needed. You need a description of the programs with the time it aired, the date it aired, the duration, which they loosely define as the duration of the program. I also define it as the duration of the elements. So if you gave 3 minutes to potholes in the street, it lasted 3 minutes. And the title of each program. So the 6 o'clock news, the 11 o'clock news, the 6:30 news. A lot of people do these in spreadsheets, an Excel spreadsheet, which is fine. Some people actually go through and do an entire, like a Word document, and do a complete narration, which is also fine because it doesn't have a format here. But whatever you do, and I found this at one station, please don't upload the newscast director scripts and call them issues and programs lists. First of all, they don't have the information, especially if you throw it to somebody outside the station. Hey, we're going to talk to some guy about the shooting that just happened here. Let's go to Joe outside. And there's no information in the script because that's an unscripted item. And very bluntly, the FCC and the public don't need to know it's time to look at camera 2. You don't need that. Just do it nice, make it nice and neat, and that'll get you by. Make sure you meet the filing requirements. January 10th, December, April 10th, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In the past, once again, when that file sat in the corner, and if you didn't quite get the thing in today when it was due, and you put it in next week, if nobody came in to look at it, you were okay. Right now, this everything you do with the public file is time and date stamped. So if you put it in late, and even if it's only 1 day late, that is enough to cause your license to be held up by the commission when it comes to renewal time. It's also, I did see one station, you notice here, I put the rules do not say unless the person responsible is on vacation, in which case as soon as possible after they return. I had one station where the issues and programs lists, at least one of them were put in like a week or two after they were due. And when I asked, I said, well, can you explain why? They said, well, Jane was on vacation. Well, okay, but you knew that the 10th was the deadline. It's okay to file something that's not fully complete by the 10th to say it was in there and then go back and add an addendum to it. It's not okay to file it 2 weeks late, because that station, when license renewal time came up, their license was held up, and I believe they got fined $7,500 for that. So you kind of need to, whoever's doing the public file needs to pay attention to the dates and make sure they have it. In the case of something like a government shutdown, I usually recommend you just drop a note in the file that said, hey, the government was shut down from this date to this date, and the FCC's online public file was not available. That happened a couple of years ago. And I think it was the end of January, maybe early February, before you could actually put things back into the file. So, in that case, what are you going to do? But I recommend putting a note in. So when the commission starts looking through it at license renewal time, they go, oh yeah, we were shut down, rather than, oh, we got a problem here, guys. No, we're shut down. For television, records concerning commercial limits, that has changed over the last couple of years. Now it's due by January 30th for the year previous. And that's basically an FCC form that gets filed. And the Children's Television Programming Report, same thing. It's due by the 30th of January, and it's for the preceding year. And with radio issues and programs lists, it's the same thing as television. I don't understand why they break it out. Local public notice announcements. That's the, on January 3rd, WXYZ filed that announcement. You have to have a certification of when those announcements were filed in the public file, when the period is up for doing the public notice announcements. Has to be put in within 7 days of the last broadcast, and it stays in the file until action has been taken on the renewal. So when the renewal has been taken care of, you can hide this from the public because they don't need to see it anymore. You can leave it, it's not going to hurt anything, but you don't need to have it in there after that. If you have a time brokerage agreement, that has to be in the file. It needs to be placed in the file within 30 days of execution. And it needs to be kept in the file for as long as the contract or agreement is in force. Now, if you don't have a brokerage agreement in force any longer, just take it out of the public file. It's not necessary. It's only if it's in force. Must carry a retransmission consent election. Again, you only need the letters for the 3-year period presently covered. You don't need them from 10 years ago. And I find a lot of stations that have stuff from 10 years ago. And it's like, the cable companies changed names. The cable company, one guy went out of business. They have another cable company. Now there's DirecTV. Now there's just get rid of the deadwood. If you don't need it, just eliminate it. Once again, with a joint sales agreement, if you have a joint sales agreement, that gets put in within 30 days of execution and retained as long as the contract or agreement's in force. If the contract has ended and you're not doing it anymore, take it out of the file. It's not necessary. If you're a Class A television station, you need to put the documentation in for continuing eligibility, and it stays there as long as you are considered a Class A television station. If for whatever reason you're not, well, then you take it out of the file. A Class A television station is generally considered Class A if they are on the air 18 hours a day minimum, and if they have 3 hours a week of local programming. So if you're a low power television, take a look at what you're doing. And if you're on 18 hours a day and you have 3 hours of local programming, well, you could probably become a Class A television station. Any shared service agreements, which would become common these days with television, those need to be in the file. Once again, I mentioned the contracts list. Just keep that in the file, and please make sure it's up to date. There are a lot of stations that file the new ownership reports and neglect to update the contracts list. Just go in and check it and just make sure it's current. Foreign sponsorship disclosures. Now that's new in the public file. If you have any documentation on a foreign sponsorship, it has to be in the file. If you're a non-com station, donor lists. This is a list of donors supporting specific programs. Some stations mistakenly think that it's a list of all donors to the station. That's incorrect. The donor list it has to be kept for 2 years, but if you have somebody sponsoring a specific program, that's what needs to be on the donor list, the information for that person or organization sponsoring that. And also for non-coms, if you're doing third-party fundraising for another organization, you need to have that information filed every 3 months in the folder or in the file. When I do an ABIP, I usually go through the public file before arriving on site and let you know if there's anything outstanding. Gives you a chance to correct it, or at least let the person who's responsible for the public file know that when we come in, we can sit down and chat about it. That's not a problem. But you'll know before I walk in the door if you have any public file issues. And I mentioned here, in case of the government shutdown, I like to see a note in the file just in case. Because sometimes the commission may put an intern on duty to take a look through your public file. And if that's the case, they may not know the regulations. They may not know the government was shut down, and now you get flagged. You don't want to do that. Administrative non-technical was the next section. And the first thing on that list was posting the station licenses at the control point. Well, that's no longer required. It's nice if you have them. A lot of people still keep them in a notebook or post them on the wall, but you don't have to post the licenses. It's nice to have them there. That way people know your license. That way people know what you're doing. Station logs. Station logs generally consist of tower light observations, EAS operation, and in the case of an AM with an unapproved sampling system, the common point and antenna monitor indications must be recorded at a change of mode at least every 3 hours thereafter. You can also keep transmitter readings. Some stations do transmitter readings, and that's fine. And your station logs are kept for 2 years. They have to be looked at once a week by the chief operator. They have to be signed off on that they were looked at. If you keep them on a computer, I typically tell people, well, get a sheet of paper, make a form that on this date, I reviewed the log, the station log from this time, this date to this date, and sign it. If it's on a computer, there's no proof that you actually looked at it. You just took a file and copied it. If you have a sheet of paper that says you looked at it and signed it, well, it still doesn't mean you looked at it, but the commission has something they can see that you signed. Equipment performance measurements. For AM, if you have the latest antenna proof of performance, and a lot of stations for some reason don't today, it's nice to have a copy of that, but you absolutely have to have any monitor point measurements you made, and you have to have the NRSC measurements. For FM, believe it or not, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, you need to have the most recent transmitter proof of performance on hand. And this is usually documentation that's sent with the transmitter when it's new, unless you make any major modifications or any real major repairs to the transmitter. You don't have to reproof it, and then it's quite easy to reproof the transmitter, but you do need to have a proof of performance on the transmitter, otherwise you're not going to pass. And for television, you need the most recent transmitter proof and the power calibration information. Interesting to note that, like up here in New York, for whatever reason, the stations like to do a transmitter proof and power calibration every 3 months. They do it every quarter. I've been to some stations where they haven't done a transmitter proof in 10 years because the IoT hadn't blown. So it's whatever time period you determine is the most recent proof. You need to have a chief operator designation, generally posted someplace. And it's always good to have an assistant chief operator in case the chief operator is not available. So that needs to be posted somewhere, and somebody has to have the responsibility of chief operator. Station ID, well, we all know it's done near the top of the hour. I do listen for an ID. I do check the HD subs on television. I usually carry a small television with me just in case the sub is not available on the cable at the hotel. I did accidentally grab one station one day when, as luck would have it, the day they decided to schedule the ABIP was the day that they had two stations. They had Network A and Network B. Network A broke away from the local newscast at 7 a.m. and went to the network news. Station B on this day was going to stay with an extra hour of local news. And on top of that, they also hubbed on the same day. So they were in the hub. And I'm sitting in the hotel room, and I was looking at Station A and said, well, that one's going to be okay. Just my gut feeling. So I flipped over to Station B, which had the new format. And lo and behold, here comes the intro to the news. They ran the spot, they ran a promo, they hit the intro to the news with the wrong station ID in the promo. No station ID came up after that. And I walked into the station and said to the chief, yeah, you didn't do the ID at 8 o'clock this morning on Station 2. He goes, what do you mean? I said, just what I said. Take a look at it. And he played it back and he went, oh my God. And he still, like he said, he says, if we still had somebody sitting in master, they would have caught it and they would have just bugged it and we would have been fine. He says, but nobody's watching it at the hub. That's number one. He says, number two, he says, production kind of forgot about doing the ID. So they had to go back in and redo everything. But they thought everything was just fine and completely unaware. Telephone access to the station from the community of license has to be toll free. So somebody in DC has to be able to call the studio toll free. If you're in Virginia, if you're in Delaware, wherever you're located, has to be either an 800 number or a number that's toll free, an exchange that's toll free from the area. There is no longer a main studio rule. Basically, it's telephone access from the community of license is considered the studio rule. And very bluntly, the station doesn't need to be staffed any longer either, which was actually good during COVID, because there's no main studio rule. So as long as the technical operation can be monitored, the phone number answered, and EAS passed through, that's what counts. And you pass that hurdle. Antenna structures, that's another section. Does the tower match the ASR? And is the tower lighting correct per the ASR? Don't laugh. I went to a station once and I'm standing there and I'm looking at the ASR and I'm looking at the tower and I'm looking at the ASR and I looked at the tower and I looked at the chief and went, they don't match. He said, what do you mean they don't match? I said, they don't match. I says, according to the ASR, you have a 351-foot tower, which requires a beacon and 2 sets of sidelights. I said, you have a tower that might be, as I don't think it's 350 feet. I says, but it's, you have 1 beacon and 1 set of sidelights. And he says, well, you're right. It's 330 feet. I says, then what happened? God bless him. We walked into the building. He had a complete file on when that tower was built 30 years previous. What happened was they filed for a 351-foot tower, applied for the ASR, got the ASR, then ordered a tower at 330 feet for whatever reason, put up the tower at 330 feet, which of course showed up with the lighting system for the 330-foot tower, and never bothered changing the ASR. It had been that way for 30 years. Nobody had caught it. It was actually an easy fix. I put him in touch with a consultant I know who, contacted the FAA, and lo and behold, 2 weeks later, a brand new ASR showed up and now they matched. But yeah, make sure your tower matches. When I worked at WOR in New York, we had a station across the street put up 2 extra towers, so we had to proof the station, and we changed a couple of parameters and, sent in a new license app. And when they sent the new license app, for whatever reason, the commission in their infinite wisdom sent along new ASRs, which didn't match the towers, and we hadn't touched the towers. So that was a phone call saying, guys, how come? Why? And that got fixed. Tower lights need to be checked on a daily basis. And if there are any outages, they have to be immediately reported when found to the FAA and a NOTAM taken out. ASR, it needs to be posted in a conspicuous place where it can be seen by the public. On the fence near the road, which is kind of like where the commission likes to see it, on the fence around the tower, and sometimes it's good to put it next to the tower. But it has to be someplace where the public has access to it. It doesn't do you any good to put it on the fence next to the tower if the public can't get past the front gate. In that case, you should put it on the front gate so the public has access to your ASR. The old rule used to be it had to be attached to the tower. That rule has been changed. Is the paint up to spec? Is the tower not extremely rusted, and is the paint not peeling and flaking? Is it truly aviation orange and white and not pink and rust? If the ASR says you do not have to be painted, some of them have been changed. And if you've changed the tower lighting system to, let's say, a strobe system, yeah, it doesn't need to be, it need to be painted. And then in that case, if it's pink and rust, well, it's pink and rust. But if your tower needs to be painted, make sure the paint is kept up. Seeing bare steel, well, first of all, that's a problem with, the tower is going to rust out. But second of all, it needs to be orange and white especially if you're in a flight path, for visibility. So I do carry a aviation orange color chip with me. And it comes in handy. I had one station. It was a big tower. It was a tall tower. It was a wide tower. And standing at the transmitter building, it did not look like it was the right color of aviation orange. And we walked up near the tower, and sure enough, it was an optical illusion from the distance. So, but make sure you're up to snuff. AM towers, are they properly fenced and secured? Most AM towers are live at the base. They have to be secured so people can't walk up and touch it and get burned. And I'm often asked what constitutes a proper fence. Well, according to the FCC and the rules, it says the fence should be designed such that it takes a concerted effort to gain access to the tower. Additionally, if all the towers are enclosed by a fenced-in area, each tower does not need to be individually fenced. So if you've got a fence around the entire field, which is in good condition, and it's kind of hard to get over that fence, you're covered. You don't need to fence each individual tower. Now, personally, I don't like to see that. I helped out a station at one point that had 5 towers in New England. And I drove onto the property, and there were no fences around the towers. Okay, fine. I could see the fence around the perimeter. But the problem was they had solar cells all over the place. So that first explained why the parameters went out, because they had solar cells all over the place, which changed the near field impedance of the towers. The other thing was those people working on the solar cells, well, with no fences around the towers, what do they know about live AM towers? What if somebody decides to go up and touch it? Use your discretion as to how you want to do it, but the AM towers need to be fenced. EAS. Number 1 is the latest version of the EAS handbook posted. Now, last I checked, there's no 2022 book. It's 2021 right now. That may have changed. I haven't looked at it in a week. Is the EAS equipment functional? Are all channels, so if you're a station with HD subs, FM or television, are all channels fed EAS? They have to be fed EAS. And do you know, is the station automatic or manual? Well, if it's automatic, it just passes things through on its own. If it's manual, how does the operator know there's an activation? That's a question I'm going to ask. Okay, your manual, you tell me that you hold it until it's appropriate to air it after the commercial break or whatever. That's okay. How does the operator know it came in? How is he aware that there's an EAS activation sitting there waiting? When you look over your EAS logs, you need all tests, incoming and outgoing, logged. That includes cap tests and tests from each of your monitored sources. If you activate in the week, you don't need, if there's an activation, if there's a severe thunderstorm warning, that counts as an activation, and therefore you don't need to do a required weekly test. Is the EAS box actually seeing the cap server? Now, at least I'm more familiar with the Sage. At least with the Sage, it is possible for it on its homepage to say, yeah, I'm seeing the cap server. And if you go through the log, you don't see anything. And in the case of this station, they had forgotten to do the update with the latest security certificate. And so technically the box was correct. It could see the cap server. It just couldn't act on anything. So go in, take a look at your logs, take a look at the diagnostics in the box every once in a while, just to make sure you're actually seeing, it's actually pulling something and actually seeing something on the cap server, not just seeing the cap server. And is the station monitoring the required monitor assignments per your state plan? That's a big one with the commission. Right now, you had talked about EAS at the beginning of the meeting. I'm in the process of doing the uploading for New York State. And boy, what a pain this is, but they are adamant that if the state actually does monitoring assignments, some stations just say, here's the LP 1s and 2s in the area. Here's who you can pick from, go ahead and pick. They don't actually do assignments. And that's perfectly viable or perfectly adequate. But whatever your state plan is, make sure you meet the state plan with EAS for monitoring. And you're monitoring in your area. For AM stations, technical requirements. Well, is your power between 90 and 105%? That's a requirement. Is your modulation no greater than minus 100%? Well, you can't do greater than minus 100, and no greater than plus 125. If you're a station and the PD insists you're going to be banging away till the cows come home, before I get there, please turn your modulation down and make it legal. What you do when I turn around and walk out the door is your business. But when I'm there, it has to be legal so I can sign off and say, yeah, the station was legal. If you're a directional station, are your antenna parameters in? Look at the antenna monitor. If they're not, pull them in. Your ratios have to be plus or minus 5%. Your phase plus or minus 3 degrees. Some people actually flip those for some reason. I don't know why, but just make sure your antenna parameters are in. If the station is not mom-proofed, make sure your monitor points are below their limits, because we're going to go out and we're going to read the monitor points if you have to do monitor points. They need to be below the limits, and that kind of fits in with are the antenna parameters in. Typically, if the antenna parameters are in, your monitor points will be in as well, unless there's something going on, construction, they're working on a bridge, whatever. Are your power and pattern changes being done at the proper time? And can you kind of show me that they are? A lot of people, keep a log. Some people don't, and I will take your word if you can kind of show me, okay, here in the remote control is where it happens. Okay, great. So it should be done. We talked about the towers being fenced. We talked about the ASR numbers. Is there adequate RF safety signage? Now, this isn't something you really find in the rules, but the commission likes to see this. So around on the towers around your AM, the fences around your AM towers, they like to see, danger high voltage, RF radiation hazard, whatever it is to keep people out. The RF radiation hazard sign tends to get people's attention. So, high voltage, people don't care nowadays, but the RF radiation sign, yeah, they pay attention to that one. Is your remote control calibrated? number of times you go to the remote control, and even though the base current's correct and everything's great, you look at the remote control and it's out in left field someplace. So check your remote control calibration. And does the remote control actually work? Had one station. Well, I'll tell a little story now. I went to the station. They had several FMs and 2 AMs that were combined. And on the FMs, each station was progressively worse than the last one. The remote control just didn't work at all. It was like, guys, I can't sign off on this one. You got no control over it. Oh yeah, well, we ordered one. Okay, when's it coming in? We don't know. Well, okay, then I can't sign off. So we went to the AM site with the 2 combined AMs. The first problem was I had to climb over things to get in. We had to cut through the brush. The second problem is when I walked in, I had to climb over things to get to the transmitter. And I glanced over at the internet modem, which had a big red light on it, and nothing but the DSL plugged into it. No network cables, no nothing. And first transmitter was an Nautel, and this was an interesting station. They actually increased their power at night rather than in the morning. And I said, so how are you doing your power change on this? Oh, well, the remote control does it. And I looked at the remote control. I said, really? I says, the remote control doesn't have a light on it, so it's not even powered. I said, your internet modem doesn't have a cable plugged in, and Nautels don't work off of Wi-Fi. So how are you doing your power changes? And he says, well, the transmitter has an internal clock. I said, okay. And I looked at the clock and I said, it's 20 minutes off. Come on. And the other transmitter didn't have the ability, didn't have net capability or an internal clock. I said, so how are you doing power changes on this? Well, I guess we're not. I said, okay, well, you're hurting yourself because you can increase your power at night. But I can't sign off on it because, once again, you have no control. Well, they had to go out and fix it. And later, in a couple of more slides, I'll tell you what we found outside. You need your NRSC measurements. So they have to be available. Whether they're available at the site or in your office, doesn't matter, as long as you can show me your NRSC measurements were done within the last 14 months. Is there reasonable access to the tower base? So let's get back to that station. I said to him, we got to go out and read the base currents. So I looked outside and I looked to the tower and I said, I'm not going out there because I couldn't see the tower base inside the fence. That's how overgrown it was. And they had a tree that was 4 inches in diameter growing next to the tower. And the guy said to me, well, because of COVID, we haven't been able to get the landscapers out there. And I said, dude, 4-inch diameter trees don't grow next to towers in under a year. Come on, and they eventually had everything cut down, and he sent me pictures of all the there were 3 ammeters there, one for each station and one for a combined. So he sent me pictures, and okay, they got signed off on, but it was like, really, you really need to clean out around your tower bases, especially if we're going to inspect, because we do need to see the ammeters. Is your building secure? Not an FCC regulation, but you'd be surprised how many people have a door that's just about flapping in the breeze. The rules do state that you have to take reasonable precautions to make sure people don't have access to your transmitter. So, make sure your building's secure. Are the indicating instruments adequate? Now, there is a regulation on the size of a meter face. So if you have a meter face, if you have an older ammeter that's got like a 1 inch or a 1.5 inch meter face, that doesn't cut it. It's got to be, I believe it's 2.25 inches as a minimum. So, just check to make sure your metering is okay. You need to have an efficiency factor posted for the transmitter in the event of an RF ammeter failure. And that's kind of difficult with a lot of transmitters right now because not so much with the AMs, but with the FMs, and I'm pretty sure with television as well, they adjust their efficiency depending on a lot of factors. So call your manufacturer, the transmitter, if there's not one in the book, and say, look, I need to come up with some type of efficiency factor in case I need to monitor the power on this transmitter without an RF ammeter. And they'll be able to give you something. If you look in the FCC rules talk about plate modulation and talk about tubes, which okay, there are tube transmitters out there, but not too many these days. Is your monitoring adequate? You know, who can actually look at the remote control? Can the transmitter be shut off within 3 minutes if the station's out of tolerance? So if you do power change, how do you know that the power is still in if you're within power limits, especially if you reduce power at night? How do you know if your antenna readings are in? Make sure your monitoring on this is adequate. And are the ground radials in decent shape and buried appropriately? Well, if they're buried, we can't tell if they're in decent shape, but do you know if they exist? At the base of the tower, we should actually see them kind of go out and disappear into the ground. And for me, that's adequate. Some stations, they don't have ground radials. There's at least one station in New York City that's located in a wetland. Well, wetland. It's in a lagoon. They're using copper strap off of 8 sides of the tower, and that's their ground system. So, and the commission accepted it. If you're an FM station, is the antenna as described on the license and at the correct height? If you're supposed to have a 4-bay and you have a 3-bay, well, we got a problem. Does the tower match the ASR? Is the ASR number posted? Is the transmitter power output as described on the license? Or a lot of licenses, for whatever reason, don't list the TPO. If it's not listed, can you show me how it's calculated? Can you show me where that figure came from, where you're operating the transmitter? Because the commission will ask if they show up. Again, is your remote control calibrated? Is there an efficiency factor posted? And especially, like I said, with the FMs, the efficiency varies depending on a lot of factors. You need to come up with an efficiency factor. If you determine the efficiency factor, well, that's fine. Just it needs to have an efficiency factor. So if your output power meter failed, how could you determine your power? Again, does the remote control work? Is the remote control program to alert personnel if out of tolerance? Your modulation on an FM is limited to 100% unless you're running subcarriers. And you can increase 0.5% for each 1% of subcarrier injection. So if you're running RDS and you're running a 67 kilohertz subcarrier, and those add up to, let's say 20%, well, you can modulate 110%. Is the station within mask, particularly for an HD station? Can you show me this? Can you show me the last time you proofed the station? And it doesn't have to be yesterday, but can you prove to me that you're in mask? And that gets back to their most recent transmitter proof. Is the frequency plus or minus 2 kilohertz? Sometimes I'll pull out my frequency counter and we'll find out. Many times I won't, because it's nowadays most transmitters, they just won't be off. They're that accurate, especially if they're an HD. You're locked to GPS. Again, are the indicating instruments accurate, and is power between 90 and 105%? That's what you're looking for. Television right now is a little, some of the things are a little ambiguous, because if you look in the FCC rules are still written for analog television. Yeah. So, is your power between 80 to 110%? Is the station within mask? And a lot of stations are running a spectrum analyzer right there, or an analyzer right there at the site. So it's easy to see if you're in mask. Is the frequency correct? Now for the pilot, if you're running ATSC1, not ATSC3, the pilot should be plus or minus 10 hertz unless it's actually specified to be plus or minus 3, and they actually prefer to see it plus or minus 3. I believe that the frequency tolerance of the actual carrier frequency is still plus or minus 1,000 hertz. So as long as you're in the ballpark, I'm going to call it good. Is your most recent proof on the transmitter available? And nowadays that tends not to be a problem, because if you've repacked, you've got a recent proof available. Some stations in upstate New York, the integrators were going so fast, they never bothered leaving the proof. And I walked in and went, "Where's your proof?" And the guys looked at me and went, "Huh?" "Yeah, your proof." We never got it. And they made phone calls and got it. So make sure you have your proof. Does the antenna match the license? Yeah, I'll take your word for it, because I'm not going to climb the tower to find out. Is the ASR posted? Is the remote control calibrated and working? And are the indicating instruments adequate? That's typically what we look at for television. If you're interested, You want to keep the FCC out the door? Well, the way to sign up, contact the Broadcasters Association. Don't call me because I'll just refer you to the Broadcasters Association. You pay the fee. They send me the contract. I contact you. We set up a time. We come in and we walk through it. If there's any issues, you have a chance to fix it. So it's better that I find it rather than the FCC. Please be ready when you sign up. I've had several stations that were nowhere near ready to be inspected. This should be considered as the FCC walking in the door, not me. And I walked in and everything, nothing was even close to being, to being able to be checked off. And it was like, and they said, well, we just wanted to see where we were. Well, for the public file, you can go right to the rules and it tells you where you are. A lot of the legal stuff, or not legal stuff, but the technical stuff is it's very simple. It's very basic stuff that we've all been living with for years. So if you're not ready, don't sign up. You get a 6-month reprieve, or it's a 5-month reprieve actually, because once the commission is informed that you've signed up for the ABIP, they agree to stay away at that point. So if something is wrong, you do have the chance to fix it. So please be ready, because that clock starts ticking the minute that contract hits. Now, what if you're operating under STA? I went to a station one day and I drove up. It's supposed to be a 3-tower AM directional and only 2 towers were there. And I went, I think we have a problem. And the guy went, yeah. He says, a couple of days ago, the guy was cutting the field and a bee got into the cab on the tractor, and he's allergic to bees. And while he was swinging away trying to get the bee out, he hit the guy anchor and down came one of the towers. And then he handed me the application for the STA. Okay, now we'll inspect the station under the STA. So what are the conditions of the STA? We will inspect you under the STA and call you good. If you meet all the conditions, we're there. I can pretty much almost tell you what I'm going to find when I walk into a transmitter facility. If the site's relatively neat and reasonably clean, it doesn't have to be spotless. Chances are I'm not going to find much, if anything. If I have to fight my way to get into the facility, if I have to climb over stuff to get to the transmitter, if I say, can you show me how you measure power? And you go, well, guess what? We're going to have a problem at that point, and we now probably should look a little deeper because you probably have some deeper problems. Please don't lie or try to distract me from the checklist and the requirements. It's my job to make sure you're going to pass this, and it doesn't do you any good to get me distracted, have me miss something, because if the commission walks in, you're going to get caught on it. And again, it's better than I find something in the FCC. And my favorite phrase is, don't BS the BSer. Just be straight. If you don't know something, it's an educational opportunity on both sides. If it looks like you're not going to pass because something's out of tolerance and you don't know how to make it right, ask, and I can probably tell you or give you a suggestion. An example was an AM station I walked into. There was a kid, as opposed to me, a lot of people are kids, but there was a kid. He was fairly new to the industry. He was actually showing me pictures. The site was interesting. It had a deco dresser towers. Those are the ones that are a tripod, and they have a distinct pattern to the grid work. And my first station I worked at had a deco dresser, so I'm a little partial to them. And they were freshly painted, and they were gorgeous. They were absolutely gorgeous. And the kids started showing me pictures from all the tower work they had done. They had gaps. They had some of the joints between the sections on the towers actually had gaps almost an inch wide because two of the 3 bolts were missing. So they had the thing rebolted, and that changed the parameters slightly on the directional. And one of his towers was just out. I mean, it was 5.5%, but I couldn't sign off. It was 5.5%. So I said to him, I said, can you just pull that back in, make it at least 5%, and I can say it's good? And he said, I don't know how. You don't know how? I said, then how does this get set up? Well, we have a consultant come in. And that's when I looked at the phaser and noticed there was nothing labeled on the phaser. So that's job security for the consultant. So I said, okay, but I can't sign off. I said, would you like to learn how to adjust a DA? And he went, sure. I said, okay, So we figured out which was phase, which was ratio, and we walked it in. It didn't take long, and now he could sign off. And he learned something. He learned how to play with the DA because he was always told, "Oh, you don't touch it." Well, if you're out of tolerance, you gotta touch it. You gotta know what to do. So in that case, I was happy to help. I did have another one time where I drove up, and this was a 6-tower array. They only required one tower to be lit. And as I'm driving up, I'm looking at the top of the tower going, what in blazes is that? And the guy says to me, he says, that's the rotating aircraft beacon. And I went, excuse me? He said, that's the rotate. I said, but that your ASR says you have to have a flashing light on top. He goes, yeah, but the airport up the street loves it. I don't care what the airport likes. Here's what it has to be. So the next day they ended up ordering a light for the top. But we walked in, and there wasn't one parameter in this AMDA that was even close. I mean, not even. Stuff was 15-20% out. And I said, you obviously understand I can't sign off on this. He goes, yeah, but would you help me bring it in? I said, dude, it's a 6-tower array, day and night. I said, we would be here all week, and I don't have my test equipment with me. I'm not prepared to do something like this. And 7 months later, they're still working. So I haven't signed off on it yet. So ask. I gave him some ideas of what he's probably going to find, and several things he did. So. If we walk in, something's out and you don't know, just ask, and I can probably point you in the right direction. And it doesn't make you look like a dope. It really doesn't. If you ever need to reach me, that's my information. It's my phone number, email. Happy to answer any questions you might have. But if you'd like to sign up with the Broadcasters Association. They'll be more than happy to set you up and get you signed up, and we can get you a certificate. And like I said, the commission stays out for 3 years. And more important, you have the satisfaction of knowing that everything you've done was right. So everything is good. And that essentially is my presentation. Let me end this, and then let me figure out how to get back to, whoops, oh no, what did I do? Show grid video, click. Okay, here we go. We're getting there.
Well, you're still sharing.
Yeah,
I can stop that if you don't want to continue to do that.
Yeah, if you can go ahead and stop it, because I can't find the button.
Let me make sure that I can do that.
No, that's not it.
Are you going to take questions?
Yeah, I can. I'm more than happy to take questions. And I'm looking for the button too. So if you can't find the don't share, I don't see the button. It's go up.
There we go.
There we go.
I had one that said stop participants sharing. So
perfect.
Now everybody who has not unmuted themselves during this, if you're going to ask a question, remember to unmute.
And by the way, it's nice to see a bunch of people I know on here. So thanks for coming.
Now we did get a couple of questions in the chat while you were, or a question in the chat while you were presenting.
Okay.
Which was, can we get the slide deck? And
yes, and I'll be happy to send it to you after we're through. I'll send it over to you, and you can go ahead and post it.
I can do that. And does it happen to be a link on your business's website?
No, I had not put one together before, but I could do that.
Okay.
I think too.
Well, we'll if you send me the link or the document itself, we'll figure out how to get it either included in the last month's meeting, or we'll put something in there.
Okay. That's great.
And of course, these are recorded. Right now, we're not showing them anywhere, but all the Zoom meetings that the chapter has done are stored away in the hopes that one day they can appear at YouTube or somewhere like that.
That's excellent. That's very good.
The other thing that I was going to mention, because I didn't mention it at the beginning of the meeting, but it sort of relates to this, is at the moment, FEMA has decided that there will not be a national EAS test in 2022. That said, if I remember right, you used to have to fill out like Form 1 and Form 2 and Form 3. And I don't think Form 1 had anything to do with the test. So there's a question as to whether you will still have to fill out Form number 1. But I'm sure FEMA will catch that and say, not only are we not testing, we're not interested in your Form 1, or yes, please go ahead and send it in anyway.
Yeah,
So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, something tells me they're going to say don't do it, because then they're going to get deluged with information that's useless.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even remember what Form 1 is, but I think it's like your name and address or something. It's, you know, it's very basic information that is not related to any particular test. So they might just say, well, if it hasn't changed since the last time, you don't have to file it. So does anyone else have questions? I thought this was great.
Yeah, I have a question. First, hello. Great to see you, Tom.
How you been, Kelly?
I'm sorry, my camera, Zoom doesn't want to use my camera, work with my camera, so who knows? Whatever. Yeah. I have two completely unrelated questions, but they just sort of came up. Way back in the rules, so this is on the EAS, the station logs. Mm-hmm. There used to be a provision that if you didn't get a test, that you had to go find out why and note that on the log. Does that still exist?
Yes, it does. So if you don't get a test, you need to investigate.
Right.
And you need to, for example, if your radio is working and your levels are adequate coming into the box, they expect you to pick up the phone and call the station. Make sure you log what you do, because sometimes the station doesn't respond. And if they don't, just log the fact that you made the phone call on this date and maybe on this date and maybe do it a third time, and that the station didn't respond, and now you're covered. You tried to do what was right.
Right.
So.
Okay. The second question is, boy, that's a lot of information. And I'm guessing, when you said stations aren't ready, that you send them the check sheet ahead of time?
It used to be they would download the FCC checklist,
right?
Which can't be downloaded anymore because they're out of date.
Right.
And I'll mention as a side note, a couple of people have asked me. They said, "Oh, we hear the SBE is going to start taking over the ABIP program." That's incorrect. The SBE is actually going to be rewriting the checklists. I'm part of that committee.
Right.
Yeah,
we were complicit in asking them to take the checklist down. I don't remember. I have no time recollection with COVID. I don't know if it was last month, last year, 3 years ago. I don't know when we did it, but it was so far out of date that it needed to be just taken down.
Oh, especially the television one. I mean, you look at the television one, it's laughable. It's like, seriously?
Yeah.
What's the power on the video transmitter?
And my third question is, what kind of prep do you do before you show up to do the inspection?
Well, first thing I do is I look up the station in the FCC database, and I look at the license, and I look at anything that's outstanding. For example, do you have a construction permit? Do you have an STA? Because obviously, if there's an STA, we're going to want to inspect under the auspices of the STA. I shouldn't expect. If you had, I had a station 2 years ago that actually had part of a tower break off. It was an AM, and not that I inspected, I was actually taking care of the station. It was a major windstorm, and now we filed STA. So if the commission walked in, they would have to inspect the station under the auspices of that STA, because I couldn't bring up the directional.
Right.
So I take a look at that. Then the next thing I do is I look up the station's website, because there's that link that's supposed to be there that gives you the information on, for somebody with disabilities. So I look to see if that's there, and I look to see if they actually have a link to their public file on their website. And I'll use that link on the website just to say that I did it. I went to the public file. It's valid. Then I start going through the public file, basically with everything that was on the screen. And it's a lot of information. And when I finish that, I'll send off an email to, let's say it was to you, it's your station, Kelly, and you're the guy who I'm communicating with, I'll say, hey, Kelly, everything looks great. We don't have to do anything. Or I sent one out tonight where I looked, or actually it was last night. I looked through it and went, well, you need to come up with a current ownership list, contracts list, because it listed 2021. The station was just sold. They need the updated list.
Right.
And we communicate, and usually I get a response, oh my God, it'll be ready by you're here. Well, it doesn't have to be ready by the time I show up, but just make sure it's in the works. And once that's done, and once I'm armed, and I look up your ASR. So what does your ASR say? And I look up the FAA circular to which it refers. Now, some older stations, it refers to an FCC paragraph.
Right. Right.
If you go to fccinfo.com and look up the ASR there, it actually will list the paragraph. It'll tell you what the paragraph says, because it's next to impossible to find that paragraph usually. If it lists the FAA circular, you can go to the FAA website and pull up that circular. And I have just about every one that I've ever encountered on my computer. And I'll pull it up and it says this paragraph, this chapter, that chapter, the other chapter, and that then tells me, is it red lights? Is it dual lighting? Is it strobe? What the story is. And it describes the paint and how it has to be painted. It also will show me that if it's a tower that's X amount of feet, then I expect to see a beacon, maybe 2 beacons, maybe 3 beacons. So I come prepared, so I know what the tower is supposed to look like. I know what the license is and if you're an AM, what your common point or base current is supposed to be. If you're an FM or television, what your power level is supposed to be, your transmitter power out. And then I show up on site, and then we go through the technical stuff. If you're an AM, we go through the stuff you see there. If it looks like you have a problem, I may ask a couple of additional questions, not necessarily for the ABIP, but to try to help you, to say, okay, you need to kind of do this, and this will fall into place. And some people, especially with newbies and especially with kids, there are people, believe it or not, there are kids getting into our business. They don't understand AM. And AM to a lot of people, AM happens to be my specialty, but AM to a lot of people happens to be black magic. Ooh, black magic. And it's not. It's very straightforward once you understand the principles. So that's and that's how I prepare. I look at your license, I look at your ASR, I look through the public file. I look to see if there's any STAs. I sometimes, just for fun, especially if it's an old station, I look at the station history. What do the history cards say? Because I'm real interested to see what happened in 1933 and how you got on the air, just because I'm a geek. But sometimes that tells how you got from there to here. And it's very interesting to look at the history on some of these stations. It really is. So, and something else, we don't keep public files on paper anymore, but in the days when it was on paper, I walked into a station once, I opened the authorizations folder, and the first thing I pulled out was their original license from 1934. And it was like, yeah, this is nice, but this belongs in a nice historical file folder someplace, not in the current folder.
Right.
There's a TV station, and I'm looking forward to inspecting it this week up here in New York. Obviously, they don't keep the paper public file anymore, but they had a filing cabinet next to it. And that went back to the day before they signed on the air. And it had all the maps and all the construction permit stuff and the original pattern of the antenna and what they filed with the commission and what they were doing with 3 different networks. And I used to love going up there because I'd spend an hour just looking through that filing cabinet,
Yeah. Always great. Well, thanks, Tom. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, same here, Kelly. And I noticed Leslie Stimson on here. And Leslie, if you do me a favor, send me an email afterwards. We need to catch up. And Rob Bertrand, good to see you. I follow you on Facebook. And Mike Kluger, good to see you, and a lot of other people. So, some people kind of look at this when you walk in the door. You know, you're going to come in and do the ABIP inspection. Oh, they shaking their boots. And that's not why we're here. It's not a shaking your boots thing with me. It's a let's find out if you have a problem and let's fix it. And you'll find I'm one of the most jovial guys out there, and I like to make a joke about everything. So, but we get you to the point where if the commission walked in the door, and the only time, by the way, the only time they will walk in the door, if you pass the ABIP, is if they have a reason to, if they received the complaint, or if they were instructed by the DC to go out and make sure everybody's doing their EAS test. That is the only time, and then if that's the case, they'll be easy on you because you're past your ABIP. But that's the only times they'll go out and they'll violate that 3-year thing, is if they receive a complaint. That's the big one. So, anybody else?
Hey, I'll just go ahead and ask an obvious question.
Okay.
By the way, I got your email about wear the blue polo shirt tonight.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'm glad, because
Yeah.
I noticed that Jeff Elliott did as well as Fred Willard. So
Yep.
this is good.
I complied. See, I'm already in compliance.
Yeah, there you go.
If we have a number of properties for you to inspect, I take it, because I wouldn't get this answer in my case from the VAB necessarily. I take it you would really appreciate if we can coordinate to have the inspections kind of coincide, so you don't have to go back up to New York, come back, go up, come back.
Right. Exactly. Well, and actually that works to your benefit, because the way the VAB and MDCD works is that when I come to town, you guys pay the expenses. So if I drive, which is probably going to be the case, there's mileage. So if the more I can do at the same time, less expensive for you.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, and I prefer to do it that way if we can do, and if the guy across the street, if you're talking to him and they're thinking about doing it, say, hey, why don't we do it at the same time? I'll do you, I'll do him. We split the costs.
Yep.
And ultimately it becomes cheaper for you and it works out well.
Got it.
And then of course there's more people to go out for lunch afterwards. So hey, we're great.
We'll probably see if we can't have an SBE gathering of, okay, who wants to do this in a certain month, and as long as that doesn't slow the rest of us down, may have a big Richmond visit for you.
Well, and that would be great. What they actually do that up in Rochester, New York. They're getting everybody together now, so we kind of do it all at once. And I'll spend the week and just do everybody, and everybody's happy.
Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And like I said, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to work with you, happy to answer any questions. And like I said, it's good to see everybody.
Say, Tom, I have a question. When you were talking about all the specifications on a tower, I assume many of these are, you go there, you're out in a few hours because they're mostly in compliance. Do you come by at night to see if the tower lights actually work?
If I'm in town, I will do that. If not, I will ask you if you can put your hat over the photocell.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, anyone who's being responsible, I can if it's a sunny day, I'm kind of hosed, but I can almost show anyone on demand that my lights are working. Right. I always know the right angle, and I bet everyone else does too.
Yeah, and if you have a site, and DC is a big enough market where no one's probably going to try to get away with this. But I had a station in a relatively smaller market, television station, and as we're driving up to the site, I'm looking at the tower, and I noticed one of the strobes is out. But I also noted that the remote control said that all lights were okay. So we get into the site, and I said to and I was with the general manager. Their contract engineer couldn't make it, and I said, okay. I says, you have a strobe out. I said, but your remote control says everything's fine. I says, can we get a hold of your engineer to find out what's going on? He says, sure. So he starts calling him, and I started nosing around. They had a Burke remote control. Now I used to work for Burke, and I know these things like the back of my hand. So I took a look, and okay, it's on channel 4, and here's the wires on 4, and it goes up this way, and it goes that way, and it goes goes over here. Here's the controller, and I opened the controller, and the wires went to are the tower lights on or off light? Is the system on or off set of contacts? Had nothing to do with the alarms. And he gets the engineer on the phone, and the engineer says, "Well, I just haven't had time to properly program it." And I went, "Dude, that's when I used the don't BS the BSer line." It's like, dude, I just looked in your controller, and you have absolutely nothing wired for alarms. We have a fail here. And it's like, yeah, I'm not asking to get the tower light fixed, because there is a NOTAM out. Yeah. And by the way, I'll also look for NOTAMs. I'll go to the FAA website and I'll look for NOTAMs. I said, there is a NOTAM out, which is good. I said, but it's not good that you're supposed to be able to tell when you have a light out, and you can't unless you're standing here. And well, needless to say, he rewired, and it was taken care of. Let's see, and I see something else in chat here. Oh, great presentation. Thanks, appreciate that. But yeah, no, that's that's how I do it. I'll just say, hey, can you throw your hat over the photo cell? Yeah, lights come on. Okay, we're good. So, and sometimes I'll count them. Depends. If it's every now and then, how you meet that person, you don't think you can really trust them. Sometimes I'll do that, and I'll actually sit there and count the bulbs as they're on, and maybe I'll get in the car and go for a drive if it's easier to see them farther away. So
I was going to say that and binoculars, right?
Yep, exactly. For the most part, you can pretty much tell how tall a tower is by looking at the first couple of sections, because they're either 10 or 20 feet, and except for row 25, in which case they do have 7-foot sections. So I can pretty much tell if the tower is what it should be. And if it's an older tower, chances are it is. And of course, as part of the ASR, when I say does it match the ASR, that also asks, is the tower where it's supposed to be? And I had a station once, I looked at it, and I look at Google Earth. I look at Google Earth to see where the tower is and make sure it's where it's supposed to be. And very often, especially if it's a tall television tower, I can take a look, and I can easily see if it has the right amount of stripes, if it's a painted tower. And I'm looking on Google Earth, and and it's like, I don't see a tower here. Yet, Cavell and Mertz is telling me here's where the station is, and I'm not. So I zoomed out a bit, and I saw this tower, and I zoomed in on it and went, okay. It was over 1,000 feet off from where it was supposed to be. Matter of fact, it was on the other side of I-81. It was like, serious? Guys, you need to get this. And the tower had been there since 1946. That was the state of the art back in 46. That was about as close as they got, and it was accepted, and no one bothered ever checking it. Yet if you looked on Google Earth, it was off. And I pulled out my GPS. I carry a GPS, and I pulled it out, and sure enough, it was off. It wasn't just Google Earth being funny. So, that's what I look for, and this is what I find. And then people wonder why I drink. No, I don't drink. So.